look like Beyonce? Is it working? All right. Our host today is, as you know, the Muslim Community Center in Chesterfield. Ever since we contacted them, the leadership of the center has been incredibly cooperative and helpful in helping us put this together. They've been over backwards in many ways. And they even offered to pass the collection plate and, so to speak, and pay for our breakfast this morning. So I want to thank them. I'd like to introduce Osman Mazar, who will tell us just a little bit about the center.
I hope everyone can hear me fine. It's good in the back. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you to the Muslim Community Center of Chesterfield. My name is Osman Mazar, and I'm one of the board members of this center, and also the principal of the Sunday school that we have here. And in my day job, I work for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, which I'm sure many of you might have heard of, as I see some pride in On behalf of the entire community, I would like to thank Mr. Stan Malcolm and Mr. Gary Leclerc, who I'm told was unable to make it today, in really giving us this opportunity to host this event and also this wonderful property. We are truly excited to have such a large crowd who's interested in having an open dialogue about Islam, especially in these times when there are a lot of negative ideas floating around about Islam. And today, my friend, Brother Malik, will expose some of those myths and misconceptions that have been floating around recently. Before I ask him to come onto the stage, I would like to share some very brief facts about this center. We acquired this center in the year 2012, so it has only been about 3 or 4 years roughly, and we're still very young and learning, and this actually happens to be the only community center in the Richmond area, and the first one and the only one so far. So I welcome you again. Ever since we opened the doors in 2012, this place has served as not only a place of worship for the hundreds of local community members we have here, but also just for socialization and get-togethers and the sporting events that we have here at the center. We also have an excellent Sunday school program where the mission for the school is to raise the next generation of young Muslims to be not only good Muslims, but also good American citizens. And that's really what we strive for as we run our Sunday school and all of the activities in general. And last but not least, we also care about the greater community of Richmond. And therefore we support other community events and services like food drives, and our youth actually participate in many interfaith events. With that, I would like to get Stan actually back with you guys. Thank you very much.
Okay, now we get to our main speakers today, Malik Khan and Anjum Ali. Both are long-term residents of the Richmond area, and both are very active in both the RVA community and in the mosque and the Islamic Center. Malik's a retired senior engineer from Philip Morris and active in the American Red Cross that helps train the Chesterfield County Police Department. Also leads prayers here on Friday afternoon. Anjum is a graduate of Wellesley College and McGill University and currently an adjunct professor at J. Sargent Reynolds. And she's a consultant, board member, or executive at Hope in the Cities and Initiatives for Change, and other nonprofit organizations that work for to bring communities together. I'm very excited to introduce these two folks and have at it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Permit me to greet you in a truly Islamic fashion. Assalamu alaikum. Which means peace be upon you. I could have said actual Muslim. Shalom alaikum. It's one the same. But again, welcome to all of you. It's wonderful to see so many folks from the West End. I think that's correct, that most of you are from the West End perhaps, or at least the downtown area. There is life on West High Street. Right. There is life beyond Granite Mill and Woodlake. That's right. Right. Okay, all right. Normally, our presentation on orientation of Islam and Muslim, it takes about 45 minutes to a couple hours. We don't have that luxury of time, of course. So, we decided that we talk about the 10 misconceptions, if you will. On your chair, you have a cheat sheet, right? Two actually, I think. And there are some terms, and not just terms, but I think basic beliefs. That has been given to you, of course. This will provide you good information, and I think it will help you folks understand the presentation itself. So before I launch into the presentation, there are a few terms, words, if you will, that I'd like to explain. The very first one is Islam, which is the religion itself. The definition is given to you, it should be on that cheat sheet. The Islam is the religion, and the people who actually follow Islam are Muslims. Muslims can be either male or female. Another word that needs to be explained right at the outset is the word Quran. The word Quran stands for, means the divine scripture, according to Muslim belief. And we believe this is the word of God, Allah, in Arabic. And sometimes we use the word God, interchangeably, capital G, if you will. So it's the word of God, which was revealed to Prophet Muhammad. He's the last prophet, according to Muslim belief, over a period of 23 years. And it was Archangel Gabriel who actually revealed it to him. So, the one thing that you'll need to recognize and understand is that the Quran is the word of God for us Muslims. Prophet Muhammad is not the author of that book. From cover to cover, it's the word of God. Okay. Now, let's get into the presentation itself. There are more than 10 misconceptions, by the way. We just chose 10 because we don't have enough time. And the title, and Stan had mentioned myths and misconception. There are some authors, for instance, there's a British historian, Lacey. He uses the word myth, but it's one and the same. I think essentially what happens is when misconceptions really get blown up, mushroom, and when they blossom, they turn, they turn into myths. Okay, this is the first one.
I just wanted to do exactly this. Just let me just tell you, I'm going to be piping in here and there if I feel like it. So I just wanted to go ahead and make sure you guys knew that I'm Anjum Ali, and I just wanted to tell you that we're going to do this kind of thing very naturally. So if he's talking and I suddenly feel like I have to say something, then I will do that. Okay? Don't be surprised or horrified, but I will. I'll go ahead and just pipe in when I need to.
Thank you so much. I mean, she was really the great presenter. I'm amateur, really honest with this. She's the expert. But feel free, please. Okay. So this, we'll start out with the very first misconception, and that is that the Quran teaches Muslims to kill Christians and Jews. And we've grappled with this one for a number of years. All right.
Quran. There is no question about that. There are 18 verses, according to one scholar, that talk about, that encourage Muslims. And now, please watch my words over here. The word used in those 18 verses is the word qital, and I said that in Arabic. But you have to understand the proper frame of reference. So when you account for the proper frame of reference, the actual translation becomes Muslims are encouraged to engage in combat. That's what it means, engaging in combat. Now, the obvious question is, who with whom? That is the question. So here I have to delve a little bit into Islamic history. Prophet Muhammad was born in Mecca, that's the city in Saudi Arabia. And at that point in time, the inhabitants of that city were pagan Arabs. These guys were idolaters. They had 360 idols, and those 360 idols were sitting in a central place of worship. This is what they used to do. And so they were extremely hostile and resistant to this fiercely monotheistic message of Islam. They resisted it. So much so, they actually killed Muslims. They committed barbaric, horrific crimes against Muslims. They took away their homes. They took away their belongings. And it was absolutely terrible. No question about that. So, and this actually lasted not just a few years. It lasted approximately 20 years. So this is who the Quran is actually referring to. The pagan Arabs, the idolaters. They resisted it. Now, on the other hand, how does the Quran refer to the Christians and Jews? There's one term which the Quran uses, and it's called Ahl Kitab, and I said that in Arabic. People of the book, for both Christians and Jews, and it's a term of respect. Kitab means book, and this Kitab or book is referring to the divine book, the original Old Testament and the original New Testament. That is what the Quran is actually referring to. People of the book. Individually, for Christians, the Quran uses the word Nasara, which means helpers. Helpers of Isa ibn Maryam, or Jesus, peace be upon him. Individually, the Quran refers to Jews as Yahud or Bani Israel. Bani means descendants of Israel. And Israel, of course, is another name of Prophet Jacob, peace be upon him. Anything you would like to add? No. Okay. Next, please. Here we go. This is also another misconception. And we want you to debate for it. Now get into that. Okay. There is a verse in the Quran. It's in chapter 5, verse number 51. It says that Muslims cannot take Jews and Christians as slaves. Okay. The word that is used over there is awliya, plural, singular, wali. Wali means spiritual protector, which is different than friend. Now, I, as a Muslim, I cannot be a spiritual protector of a Christian. I cannot be a spiritual protector of a Jewish person, and vice versa. And that is why there is a disconnect over there. And why are we arguing to be named? It's because the English translations done of the Quran, of course, done by Muslims, they actually use the word friend. That was done 60, 70 years ago. But we are to be blamed, hardly to be blamed. Again, it is illogical, and you can actually read the second bullet point over there. It is illogical, and it's incorrectly understood.
And I think that's part of the, can everyone hear me? Okay. I think part of the difficulty is that most people, of course, are in America, they're picking up a translation. And Muslims themselves, a limited number actually know the Arabic language properly, surprisingly, because everyone assumes because you're Muslim and the Quran is originally in Arabic that you should know Arabic. Most Muslims learn how to read and write it. They actually don't know the language and how to translate it themselves, so they rely on translation. And so depending on who your translator is, you're going to hear this as friend, or even in the case of some of the other verses, you can read it according to whatever someone's interpreted as. And so we're kind of stuck in this situation where until more Muslims learn the language of Arabic themselves, it is going to continue this way, so that Muslims themselves are not getting the proper interpretation. And this was very different at the earlier period of Islam, and for the time of the Islamic Empire, when Arabic was the lingua franca. And in fact, Europeans who used to go there used to learn Arabic as well. So until Muslims themselves do that, we're in this predicament of misunderstanding and misinterpreting the Quran.
Thank you. This is the third one. Islam does not tolerate other religions. Okay. Now, what we have done is we have chosen phrases from the Quran. And the very first bullet point, if you will, and you see that bold in bold, La ikraha fi din, and I said that in Arabic. What does it mean? There is no compulsion in religion. The second one, lakum dinukum waliya din. I'm just reading off the slide over here to you, your religion, and to me mine. And the third bullet point, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. This one perhaps I'll spend just a little bit of time, which means we, and I put God in parentheses. Now you have to understand the style of the Arabic language. God in his infinite majesty, when he expresses himself, he expresses in the third person. That's just the style of the Arabic language. So that's one thing that I wanted to point out. So we have bestowed dignity on the descendants of Adam, and we of course believe that the very first human being that was created was Adam. The rest of us, whether we happen to be current day Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, Jews, we're all descendants of Adam. So here, the Quran clearly shows, that dignity has been bestowed. And if God has bestowed dignity on the descendants of Adam, who are we must bestow dignity as well.
Oh yeah, and no, that's fine. I don't need to add anything in particular. Can you guys, is this working now? That's what I'm from. Good, sorry. No, it's fine. Okay. And just to say that we can't get into all the details on the Quran and the story of Adam and Eve, but that's also very interesting if you guys ever do get a chance. It's quite different than the Bible. Just to say.
Thank you. I think I'd rather take you to the lead this time.
So I would start with that. We don't have that much time. But this is, of course, one of the biggest areas. I do talks that can, in my classes when I cover the issue of Muslim women and their rights, I think it takes about at least a good 5 classes, which can be about almost close to 8 hours worth of material. So I'm doing this really, really compact version right now. Suffice it to say that going back into the context of the history, although there were certain rights that the pre-Islamic Arabian women had, the majority of those were much smaller in comparison with the abuses that they were suffering. One of the greatest ones being infanticide. Female infanticide was rampant in Arabia because it was so shameful to have a daughter. When Prophet Muhammad brought the message of Islam, one of the primary verses that came about was that this needed to stop immediately. That women could not be treated and seen as unequal, and that people should have been ashamed, and the consequences in the hereafter were going to be very severe for people who killed their daughters. But Islam actually, believe it or not, in a global system at the time, where there was a great deal of abuse and very minimal rights for women, Islam actually was a champion of women's rights. Prophet Muhammad gave women the rights for choosing their own marriage. Okay, that's something by the way, I'm just letting you know, all the stuff I'm telling you right now, I'm fully aware that what you see out there in the world is not reflecting what I'm saying, okay? This is a serious problem in the Muslim world today. And a lot of people don't understand that, but this is why the terminology Islam versus Muslims becomes such a big problem. When you constantly hear Islamic this, Islamic that, those Islamics, or those Islamicisms, or this and that, people are being made to believe that the religion itself has these problems. That's not where the problems lie. What you're about to hear is significantly different from what Muslims themselves are doing and perpetrating right now. Okay? So I could go into the whole honor killings, FGM, this, that, but right now I'm just here to tell you exactly what Islam did give them, so you understand what we hear in the media is not what Muslims should be doing. choice, the right to initiate a divorce. In Judaism, women had the right to initiate a divorce, however, they needed to get the husband's consent. We know that this exists in Orthodox Judaism today, the get. However, for Muslim women, it was not required to get the husband's consent. She could initiate a divorce on her own. Custody rights. It was best interest of the child, even over time, as the scholars did that. They learned that this was what was right for the child, not about which parent the children should go to. The trends depended on the cultural norms at the time, but the judges, if you look at the cases, were predominantly doing it in best interest of the child. Prenuptial agreements. Muslim women were encouraged to have prenuptial agreements. They actually knew their rights at the time. Very few Muslim women today actually even know about prenuptial agreements. At that time, you can find court records showing women having kinds of agreements that even would astound Western women today. Women charging their husbands rent because they were living in their house. Women charging their husband for breastfeeding their own babies because that was their way of making income. There's an excellent book by Maya Schatzmiller up at Western Ontario University on women in labor during the classical period of Islam. And there were so many courts that would favor women in judgments on business and transactional levels that Jewish and Christian women who had their own courts to go to in the Islamic Empire would actually go to the Muslim courts because it was known, it was renowned that the judges favored women because they knew women had certain limitations and so they would favor them. And these are all things that you can find actually in research done by people like Maya Schatzmiller, Judith Tucker, Barbara Stowitzer from Georgetown University, and these are amazing pieces of research. And of course, the right to dispense for wealth that she pleases, the right to own property. This was something that was not typical for women at that time. Nowhere in the world, actually, very few areas allowed this. If they did, it was often that in marriage it was given over to the husband, where the husband had the right. In Islam, women keep their own name for a reason, because it was important that the father always know his child and be responsible financially, but that the woman was not going to take the name of her husband because she was nobody's property. She was her father's daughter, and that she also could change her husband, but she didn't change her father. And then raising a family, sorry, I didn't mean to make it sound like husbands are dispensable. But the raising of the family, this is actually very, very important in Islam is the family structure. It is considered, and I think very similar to Christianity and Judaism, the building block of society, the basic foundation of society. And so in this, you come into the debate area about what women should be doing, what men should be doing, roles, etc. There was never something that fully prevented women from working. As I said, even in the classical period of Islam, under the Islamic Empire, women would find ways to do business. And the very oldest university in the world, which is in Morocco, was founded and established by a Muslim woman way before Europe ever had a university, around 800 AD. And so balancing that is one issue. The issue about clothing, a lot of people have some misconceptions. And it could be in Christianity because there's a little bit of a different perception from what the Bible says in Corinthians about women covering. It may be that a lot of people understand this to be the same type of subjugation or showing that she is a little bit lesser than the man who's the head of the household type of thing. In Islam, the Quran actually doesn't talk about the husband whatsoever, or the man or the head of the household, or any of that. What is specific in the Quran is about men and women both guarding their chastity, men and women both being modest. The punishments for adultery, fornication are equal. There's no difference whatsoever. You hear horror stories about stoning to death. Stoning actually is a very problematic way of punishment in and of itself. There's no basis for that in the Quran, nowhere. And so then you find that for women, covering becomes an issue of self-protection, self-preservation. Okay? In Islam, the way we understand the Quran is that God understands human nature. So we don't try to deny or reject male nature. We don't try to deny or reject female nature. But instead, instead we work along with it. And so if there is a tendency by the opposite sex to typically sexually objectify a group of people, then those people need to be careful for themselves. And so women, in order to be treated businesslike and be treated in a mature and respected way, tend to prefer to cover themselves. Because then people understand it for their mind as opposed to what's going on here or what's going on there, et cetera, et cetera. So that is the general understanding of why women are covering. And then you will hear many women say, well, this is because I believe in God and I'm faithful to God. Yes, that's the spiritual aspect of it. But it has to do with God asking that women make sure that they are preserving themselves and taking care of themselves. But we're going to, sorry, I don't want to keep going on.
Thank you. All right. Now here's another one. The word jihad has made news, I don't know, since God knows when. And again, the feeling is that, that jihad needs to kill for the sake of God. Well, here, folks, I'm here to tell you that really isn't the proper definition. And let's go into the root of it. The word jihad is actually derived from the Arabic word jihad. Jihad means to struggle. The second bullet point, and I'm really making it very concise, making it as short as possible. The second bullet point is a prophetic tradition. This is what Prophet Muhammad actually said. And it's a very sound tradition, if you will. And he said, the best jihad is to speak the truth in front of a tyrant. And of course, we can truly appreciate that, how difficult it is to speak in front of a tyrant. How no one could use his or her life. So this is what he said, that is Abdulul Jihad. And Kalimat al-Haq, I'm saying that in Arabic, that the best jihad is to speak the truth. And Sultan al-Jahil, and I said the whole thing in Arabic. The second and the third bullet point is also actually a prophetic tradition, if you will, but I have paraphrased it over here to make it crystal clear. That jihad with nafs is to be better human beings by controlling our desires. So that's the third bullet point. And again, the emphasis over here is to show that there are other things besides the militaristic jihad. That is the whole point. The last bullet point, meaning Prophet Muhammad, is recorded to have said, and you can read that when he came back from the battlefront, he said that we have come back from a lesser jihad, meaning the militaristic jihad, to a higher jihad. A higher jihad meaning that we have to better ourselves. The last point that's not really mentioned up here is that jihad has been espoused or defined by three fiqh schools of jurisprudence. And they term jihad as defensive. The school of Imam Malik, the school of Imam Abu Hanifa, the school of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. These names don't mean to you. The Muslims, they know what I'm talking about. They have defined jihad as defensive. Somebody else has to attack first before you can actually retaliate, in a nutshell. That's basically what it means. And the best jihad I could think of, in the 90s, when Muslim women were being raped in Bosnia, Herzegovina, there were some scholars who actually said, that the jihad is actually legit. The scholars have got to agree also. One person cannot just call jihad and the rest of people jump on the bandwagon. It doesn't work that way. Okay? All right. This is in a nutshell.
Well, it did work. Okay, unfortunately. I had much to our chagrin. Should have. Yes, and so I think I think one of the most important aspects is when we talk about controlling desires, it's a daily jihad. It's a daily jihad to be the person you are and to be the better person. This one, I think this is just kind of a little bit of stats for you all, but there are close to 1.5 billion Muslims. That is a lot of people on the planet. And so that also figures into when we talk about extremism and violence, because people seem to be able to see it as this massive movement, and it's actually not. It's such a small amount of people who are wreaking such great havoc, which is very tragic for the rest of the 1.5 billion. Only 15 to 20% are Arabs. This goes back to what I was Muslim world is non-Arab. The only difference is that, like I said, during the golden era of Islam, all of the Muslims learned Arabic as a proper language in their lives. So they actually spoke and understood it. That's been lost for quite some time now. And of course, this is something people often don't know, but the greater number of Muslims are in Southeast Asia or Southwest Asia, and that's Indonesia and Bangladesh are the two largest Muslim Muslim populations. And Indonesia actually features as probably one of the more fascinating Muslim cases because it actually has a history of a matriarchal society, and they're one of the few Muslim countries in the world to actually have female Muslim judges in their Islamic courts. A sizable population of the Arab Christians who live in the Middle East. This is also something people often are not aware of or don't pay attention to. Okay, for example, just in Egypt alone, you have 7 million Christians. 45% of the Lebanese population is Christian. These 45% actually call God Allah. Okay, because the word in Arabic means the same thing as in English. So that's something that a lot of people don't realize. The word Allah is an Arabic terminology for the same exact God. All right, and I remember my professor, who was a Christian Palestinian. He actually said you couldn't even tell the difference between our Christian families in Palestine. He's from Nazareth, actually. And he said you could not tell the difference between the Muslim families and our Christian families because our cultures were just so similar. And he said it was very, very small things that distinguished us, but very few larger things at all. Which goes into the issue of Muslims and Jews having never lived in peace. I mean, again, this is back to the issue of Israel today. Palestinian Christians, Muslims, and Jews for centuries were living extremely peacefully. The golden era of the Jews was under Muslims in Muslim rule. Very few people know that Maimonides, for example, was in the courts of the Muslim rulers at the time. And there were many like Maimonides who were given much respect and elevated to very high positions. Not to denigrate Europe and Christianity, but we know for a fact that this did not exist in Europe. Christians never treated Jews this well. Christians were not even treating their own other denominations very well. We know in the Catholic Church what to talk about the Jews and Inquisition and what happened with the Muslims and Jews in Spain. But the Jews really suffered under many other rulers except for the Muslims. They were given a great deal of respect in the Quran, as Malik already said. There are portions of the Quran that talk about ask the Jews, ask the people who knew, because they were revered as people who had been given the knowledge and information from before. So they were treated very respectfully, and people actually, you can even see movies that are done about that time period, and it's quite astonishing. Do you want to continue?
Certainly. All right. This is yet another misconception over here that what happened post 9/11, and the allegation is that Muslims did not condemn, and that's not true, folks. I mean, Muslims here in the U.S. and Muslims overseas, they both condemn, and they still continue to condemn. As a matter of fact, it's unfortunate that this is not being reported, but nevertheless, Muslim organizations do that. They do that individually, and they do that collectively as well. My own personal experience, I happened to be the president at that time, the Islamic Center. We took out ads. We actually went on television, radio, etc. And I wasn't the only one. I mean, it was done all across the country, from coast to coast. And as I mentioned, it doesn't reflect, it doesn't mean it's happening. We have condemned this thing, these hideous crimes over and over and over again. We'll continue to do so if that's okay. All right, this is another misnomer over here, or a misconception, if you will. People blowing up, committing suicide, especially when it comes to taking an innocent life. And you can jump all the way down to the bottom. This is the verse from the Quran. And it's very clear, it's very explicit. If anyone kills an innocent person, it's like killing an entire humankind. And even President George Bush, 43, he actually mentioned this particular, he made reference to this particular verse. So killing innocent people, nobody's going to go to heaven. There are prophetic traditions about this thing that this is not permissible, it is actually haram, it is actually taboo. And so when renegade organizations, when they commit such acts, this is really truly against Islamic tenets. So, but there are organizations that consider this to be, the renegade organizations, they consider this to be marketable. But, believe me, when it comes to tenets, that's not right.
And I think it's always important, again, to look into the context, the political context. If you have a situation like in Palestine and Israel, which is one of the rare situations where there might have been an outlier scholar who has said, this circumstance is okay, which is not unanimously agreed upon whatsoever. In fact, this is condemned him for saying that. You have to remember that even that scholar was looking at the desperation that the Palestinians are going through, how severe their situation is with their homes being taken away, literally children sitting there with their homes being bombarded and destroyed right in front of them. And so those are very unusual cases if someone does even say something about that. But again, in the Quran itself, there's another verse that says in chapter 4, O you who believe, do not consume one another's wealth, and do not kill yourselves. Okay? Do not kill yourselves. So this is it's a known fact in Islam that just I think it's similar to Christianity, that if you are committing suicide, your place is usually after hereafter.
All right, number 10. This is also a huge misnomer that Muslims hate the West. And nothing could be further from the truth, folks. Where are all these billions of refugees going today? They're leaving their own countries where they are being persecuted. They're heading west. They make a beeline to Europe, and that's essentially what has happened. And I have seen this thing with my very own eyes. If you stop by a U.S. embassy or consulate, especially in the Muslim world, there are long lines, miles long, absolutely. And the differences may be that, they might not agree, Muslims might not agree with the governmental policies, and there's a difference, And they might not agree with the government policies of the U.S. or the European governmental policies, if you will, but it doesn't mean they hate the West. No, that's a different story. And renegade organizations, they make a point, make a point, it publicizes this. Okay, additional, then many.
The very fact that Muslims want Sharia law to be imposed upon non-Muslims, I think that that is probably one of the worst myths, just simply because Muslims who are leaving their own countries already are fed up with the systems there, because they know that Islamic law is not applied correctly. It's never been applied correctly for the last, I don't know how many centuries. And this is a serious problem in the Muslim world already. They are not free in those countries. They live under dictatorships for the most part. Very rarely a government is actually applying the law correctly. They don't have any, when they come to the U.S. or other Western countries, they don't have any presumptions or assumptions that there should be any kind of Islamic law here. In fact, many Muslims actually believe, if you ask them, that the way the systems are set up in the Western countries are more close to Islamic law than they are in the Muslim world, simply because of the way the court systems and the justice system work. Islamic law is just vast. I think it can be compared to American U.S. law. It is just a very, very vast area of detailed day-to-day living issues, as well as criminal, as well as any kind you could talk about. And so for Muslims knowing full well that that's just not done. That's just not done in the Muslim world. Nobody follows those laws the way they should have been entering another time period. So this is just not the case. There are some small cases that Muslims deal with within their own communities for their own benefits, but it's just not true. Islam does not support democracy.
Certainly, absolutely. Again, this is totally contrary to what some people have been propagating. It's very much in sync with democracy. There's no question about that. I mean, in fact, if you go into early Islamic history, you'll find that some of the elections that actually took place were, it was nothing but democratic. The process was completely democratic. So, I mean, again, this is a misnomer, it's a misconception, and it's unfortunate that this has been floating around.
There's one exception I do, that fundamentalists in any of the three major religions misconstrue the scripture to suit their needs. Okay? And also accept the fact that the more cross-culture understanding we have, the better. Okay, accept those two things. What is the solution to the current parent rise and violence that's taking place, not just in the Mideast, but spreading? What is the best method to approach that?
It's a long...
Other than carpet bombing.
Okay, sorry. Yes. Yeah. I fully understand. We fully understand what the situation is. And it's a very legitimate, it's a very pertinent question that requires a lot of thought over here. And, we don't have a whole lot of time like that. Now, I'm not talking about us. We're talking about how to develop the plan and procedure for that. Education is one key thing. If you look at Afghanistan or the northwest part of Pakistan, education is really at the rate of literacy extremely low. I mean, there are people who are working on this particular problem. But when you have the rate of literacy pathetically low, I mean, it creates a huge problem. Unrelated to the fact that, these people, they don't know they don't know Arabic. It's some mullah, religious figure, who's actually, propounding certain things. It's coming out of his head. He does not have a clear understanding. That is where we have to start. I mean, that is the root cause, I think. So that's one issue. The other thing is that the scholars, the onus falls upon them. I'm talking about the Muslim scholars. And there are some. Dr. Hashmi, for instance, he is the Dean of Sharia in Kuala Lumpur, in Malaysia. He does an excellent job. And he provides, solutions. And I wish people would read his book. I'm talking about within the Muslim world. That has got to be done. Without education, I think, we're in trouble.
Yeah, and I think it's both ways. So I think that, the more Americans and more Westerners who are trying to learn about those cultures, but again, the more Muslims who are learning about the other cultures. I know in Saudi Arabia, there's a professor of Sharia at one of the top universities there, and he actually just opened up something called the Western Studies Institute, where he does a program, I believe, at Temple University in Pennsylvania. I think that was his alma mater, where he actually brings students with the credentials of the State Department to come and learn about the United States also. So these kinds of intercultural, like you said, training and education is just absolutely critical. And the Muslims themselves within have to be better trained on their own religion.
Excuse me for just a second. I am certain there are more questions, and I know I have some more, but we want to be sensitive to people who have needs to get to work and so forth. So if we want to take a minute, and if anybody wants to slip out, you're welcome to, but I'm sure you folks stay as long as you'd like.
Sure. Certainly. Absolutely. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Go ahead. Please.
And as you go, the reason we put some of those books out there was just so people could get a glimpse of some of the books that actually do have some good information. One of them is excellent, Who Speaks for Islam? It was by Professor John Esposito at Georgetown University and Dalia Mubarak, who have been working in the White House for some time. And they did a Gallup poll, and the statistics are fascinating in that book itself. And these are available at Barnes & Noble and Amazon.
We have the Christian Bible. We have a variety of translations of the English. The Catholic Bible, you name it, right? And there are issues of translation because none of us seem to speak Hebrew, Greek, or Aramaic either these days, so there's confusion.
Yeah.
Is there only one English translation of Quran to date? And if so, with this issue that you identified, for example, with the translation of the word friend,
Yeah.
are there alternatives? Is anybody working on that in the, I guess, in English?
Yeah.
Right, yes, they have made corrections. I think even the translation coming out of Saudi Arabia, I think they have made some corrections that, they took the word friend out. For instance, Abu Alam al-Dudi, towards understanding Islam, which is basically a exegesis of the Quran itself. He provides better explanation, the proper use of words. It is an ongoing process. It's a continuing process, but it's very legit. But yes, absolutely, yes.
And as you can imagine, this is an issue for the issues of women too, because in the Quran, there are many places that talk about the word saying, and tell your spouses, or the spouses have this, meaning men and women. This is spouse. It's not the word women, or wives. And yet, the men who have translated will continuously put wives, as if the wives have to carry the burden for something. And even for the issues of, a reward in heaven, the men seem to get this. Well, no, it doesn't say that in the Quran, actually. It's very gender neutral on many issues because it's supposed to be equally for women and men. And so someone who doesn't know Arabic is constantly reading translation. It seems like extremely biased text, but it's actually not in the Arabic because I've read Arabic and I know that that's not actually there. So it's very problematic, even for just that aspect itself.
Well, the
A woman
last
did
slide.
come out, sorry, a woman did come out with a translation recently too, so she was working on that.
Okay. This is the last slide. We just wanted to show you something here, just matter of FYI. Verses from other scriptures, what if they were taken out of context? And you see what can happen. And we went to the trouble of taking passages out from both the Old Testament and the New Testament. And you can see that, if somebody, a naysayer, if you will, somebody who doesn't have the proper right intentions, if you will, they can really, cut and paste and present their own agenda. So this was something that we wanted to show you. What if it is taken out of context?
And as you know, most of the terrorists that we find today are young, relatively young, and their knowledge is very little. And they don't even have the experience of life to tell them that, you need to calm down. And so they are very hyped up with anger and rage and disillusion with the world. So this is a severe problem that we're dealing with.
Is that anger and rage primarily focused on the United States?
I think I'm going to say that foreign policy of the United States and other Western countries has a great part to play in what their perception is and their understanding is. Much of the Muslim world has not been trained since colonialism, and that is a huge, huge topic in and of itself that we don't deal with enough. But majority of the Muslim world has not been trained to look inward and say, what can I do to fix the problem in my country? And so what is being trained into understanding is this is an outside force. Since colonialism, we have this problem. I don't want to deny it either, because if you look at political and economic aspects, that actually has great legitimacy because of what colonialism did to these countries. They literally stripped them of natural resources and then kind of scoffed at whether they should bother to do anything to help these countries. And then there's a book, I can't remember the author's name, it was called Empire Strikes Back, which specifically talks about the same countries that were controlled and colonized, where people have actually come back to those very colonizers and started living there, and then they went to immigration policy. But this is, I think that foreign policy definitely plays a role in it, so I don't want to reject that. But it's also what's happened within their own countries. These people are stuck in countries majority of the time that are dictatorships, great deal of censorship, no way to be able to say what they really want or do anything about the circumstances. And so that kind of lack of power and disillusionment. I always tell people, if you look at, this is maybe funny to some of you, but if you look at a domestic situation where you have maybe the head of the household as an abuser, in villages in certain parts of the world, women will resort to black magic, voodoo, because that's the only thing they can get their hands on, to do something to the person who's abusing them, because they find no other means. That is another form of terrorism, right? But we call all of these things when individuals take law into their own hands and trying to run into a situation where there's an imbalance of power, we call it terrorism. We rarely will call what a government does to its own people terrorism. But this is kind of the way we have to understand, where is it stemming from? Economics, for just now, the State Department has now finally, in countering violent extremism, in the CBP department, I have a friend who works there, started paying attention to the economic factors of what's happening and triggering all of these extremist situations right now. But that wasn't even looked at earlier. They were just like, oh, it's politics, it's this and that. They weren't even looking at the economic factors involved.
Yes.
As to some of the struggles in the Middle East, they're saying that the root cause is a lack of hope and economic opportunity, especially for young folks. Okay? Within the Muslim community, there are 1.5 billion Muslims. Is there a sort of worldwide effort within the community to provide relief and economic stimulus to the areas that are being affected by that lack of hope?
Well, again, it's a pertinent question. No question about it. But the answer to that is yes, but it's not being done in a concerted manner. And it's not being done in a unified manner. You have so many different countries in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, etc., etc. They have not joined hands, and it's not a concerted effort. This country does a little bit, this country does a little bit, no concerted effort, none whatsoever. So it's haphazard. It's a lackadaisical effort, if you will. I wish things were a little bit different. I wish, they would have formed some kind of a coalition, to help this problem, to ease the problem. It needs to be done.
Yeah, it's actually, and a lot of people focus nowadays on the Gulf countries because they have the wealth, they have the oil, and we partner with them on so many things. But they're really, a very small amount of the entire Muslim world. The majority of the Muslim world is impoverished in severe circumstances with very low literacy rates. And so you're talking about a very small group of people who control a great deal of wealth, but it's up to them, right? What are they really doing? How much are they going to? It's kind of like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. People who are billionaires, you go and you're like, can I get some? And so the Muslim world is in that predicament. We just have those few. People are looking at, shooting up all these skyscrapers and worried about, gold plating on their bathrooms and, their VIP lounges. Meanwhile, so what can you do? So we have to understand that. But yeah, that hope is not anything we have quickly.
Yes, sir. Just give it.
But it seems that there's a very fractious nature of the religion from country to country that also melds politics with the religion that causes a great deal of intolerance one border country to another. So how do you resolve that issue within the religion itself? And that's where it kind of falls apart for me, right? That they'll never resolve the problem. For the ignorant people, the smarter people, you guys are here. Right?
Brain drain on those countries.
Brain drain.
Brain drain.
Exactly. So how do you deal with that? How do you solve that?
Well, not very easy. That's very, you're absolutely right. There's no question. I think, if I may say so, Kevin, I think you're referring to the Shia-Sunni divide. And
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's what you're actually referring to. It's unfortunate, that Saudi Arabia and their cohorts, are so adamant and they don't even want to talk, and that's not right. It isn't right. They're looking for their own personal interests. They have their own personal agendas. That's a problem. Believe me, there are a lot of people over here, a lot of Muslims over here that are not fans of the Saudi kingdom, if you will. We have tremendous respect for the, for the places over there, of course, the holy cities, if you will, what have you. But when it comes to the kingdom and rulers, we don't have much respect, really, honestly. I, for one, I should say that.
Yeah, and there's actually a book out there called The Great Theft, which is probably one of the best written books on this issue about what Saudi Arabia has done, unfortunately, to make sure that it has the final say on the religion of Islam, which is actually probably one of the last countries that should have it because of the way we handle Islam. But I want to bring back historical context into this, because, you know, Shia, Sunni, the divide that happened was very bad. But at the same time, we have to remember that for centuries and centuries, Muslims actually did not have this explosive problem. There might have been some skirmishes, there might have been some things here and there, but to the level that it is today, on that point, a lot of people will argue that there's a lot of outside influence, and it has to do with the oil, and it has to do with the Gulf countries and the control. Because even when we go back to the issue of what happened with Iran, and I mean, this is something that is very difficult to talk about in America because we have such severe biases in this country. And I think in the movie Argo, they give you that really nice little glimpse of what was going on right in the beginning, where everybody's shredding papers in the U.S. Embassy in Iran, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, you know, everything's, you know, they're wreaking havoc, and you know that we had a part in doing some really shady stuff there. But then the rest of the entire part of the 2 hours is all about, you know, how does Hollywood end up saving us and Canada saves the day type of thing. But the focal point, which should have stayed longer, was how much damage have we gone in and done. And Saudi Arabia has been our bedfellow for a very long time. And they are very, very determined to ensure that Iran does not get a piece of the pie. And so it is a political issue, actually. It's not really a religious issue. It is a political issue. It's an economic issue. And yet, people keep bringing it back into the religion. Religion, even the Shias and Sunnis have lived for centuries together. And like I said, there might have been a couple of tips here and there, little skirmishes and a little bit of power struggles, but never to the extent that we're seeing today. Pakistan, the Shias and the Sunnis lived there just like the Christians and the Muslims for centuries without problems. And in fact, Pakistan, sometimes you can't tell the difference between the Sunnis and the Shias and some of the things that they're doing. But only recently has that become conflated with other issues, and then people actually having riots and actually fighting one another. These are very recent and modern issues. They don't really go back into the religion as heavily as people are believe.
One last word before I pass this thing over to Stan. You know, there's some free literature outside. Feel free to pick them up. And thank you so much.
Too, I believe, yes.
Stan.
I would like to thank both our hosts and speakers tonight, and also for today, and also all of you for coming out and making the effort to learn about this. And maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Thank you. Thank you guys
And
very much.
one more gentleman here.
Yeah, I just want to say, I want to thank everyone for coming. Swan had to leave, he had a meeting at 9 o'clock, so he had to leave. But if you have any questions, we're always here. Our cards are outside. Please pick them up. If you want to have any other meetings going forward, please let us know. We're open to any